Hi, I'm Phil Dispenza, and this is Collecting, Investing, or Somewhere in Between. This is our first episode of the comic book section. Today we're going to cover the Golden Age, and I've decided that I'm going to break it up into at least two parts and possibly three. So you're going to see only two sections today, but I wanted to talk about the Golden Age in general. Golden Age right now, approaching 80 something years, 85 years, started in the 30s. And most of the comic books then, the kids growing up, they're elderly. So the first question you have to think about, investing wise, is there going to be any interest in it? And that's why we're going to talk about different publishers, characters, genre, and stuff. Because back then, comic books with the war, extremely popular. Print runs were hundreds of thousands of print run copies, if not breaking a million. So feasibility of collecting something that had that higher a print run, there's a big thing because the war pushed recycling of paper. So even though there were high print runs, the survivability of many of these comic books may be low. So again, popularity versus rarity. Some people save their stuff. You see some of these pedigrees, high grade, and they sell for tons of money, way over guide 30, 40 years ago. But age has a big factor because of the fact that most people didn't store their comic books properly. So even if they did survive, you come across lots of wear and tear, repairs, and brittleness. So, what's going to be, something to invest in or just to collect? There was a photojournal guide by Gerber that came out in, I believe, late 80s. I actually have a nice leather-bound copy of the Golden Age photojournal guide. And back then they were doing estimates on how many copies are out there. So if you look at something like an Action Comics 1 or Detective Comics 27, there's estimates, high scarcity, high rarity, grade-wise, things that have been professionally graded, with the comic grading companies, no more than 75 maybe right now. So, you just go to the census and you can see rarity. A lot of times, if you look at certain census on these grading companies, you're going to find that there's copies of things that have never been graded. You would think of a title like Archie or something. Yeah, we'll grade every Archie. You go through it, there's actually holes. So is something worth it? It depends. Some of the stuff is really, really rare. And if you looked in that Gerber guide, he would have holes. Like, he didn't have pictures of things. He tried to take pictures of, high quality, like the Mile High. There were a lot of Mile High photos in there because you want to, have a nice display inside your book. You want to show the best if you can, but sometimes you just couldn't come across things. And he doesn't have photos of everything. There's runs. Sometimes they'll put runs of like 20 to 30 as a rarity of 7 or something. And that might not be true now. Things are found, especially in the past 30, 35 years, since that thing was compiled, the book, the data. A lot has been, some pedigrees have been found and things. So again, I always say, do your homework and, decide what you want. So I'm going to talk about, I'm going to call them superhero comics, But it's the characters themselves. What makes a company popular? From back then to even now, and that's the big thing. That you know, something that could be valuable now might not be valuable 20 to 30 years. Excuse me, I need water. Taking a little break. Because some of these characters, they came out with publishers that were popular then. Everybody and their grandmother was putting out comic books back then. It was a reprieve from thinking about the war. A lot of these superhero comics actually pertain to the war. So you always see, Submariner and Human Torch. They'll battle the Nazis. They'll battle Hitler. The DC character Superman saves the Americans and sinks the sub of the Nazis or whatever. And so a lot of these comic books are World War II related. So here we go. Are they going to be popular to kids now? If you're even a teenager, most kids have no interest whatsoever in World War II. If they're lucky, their great grandfather fought in it. Both of my grandfathers were in World War II. And like I said, I'm 50 years old, so both of them have passed. So right now, I think the golden age is being held up by the baby boomers. Most of these people, I'm not going to say men because, women could collect too, are probably in their 60s to 70s right now. So again, thinking 20 to 30 years, the majority of these baby boomers are not going to be alive. So unless they pass not just the collection, but the interest, the thrill of collecting these vintage comic books, I think most of them are going to not necessarily lose value. They might slightly, but they're going to taper off. They're going to, remain steady. And you're going to see maybe, the price, price guides will probably put a specific price. But, as every collectible, and you'll see it in comic books, you go to a store and you'll see a $4 or $5 or $10 comic book and it's sitting in a dollar bin. Why? Because they can't move it for $5, despite what the price guide says. They have a minimum of like $3 a book or $4 a book or whatever it is now. And that's because the cover prices are $3 to $4. So they don't want to go below cover price. So they're assuming that there's interest in it. But most of the golden age, the cheap stuff, are usually companies you've never heard of. I'm going to cover probably more of the more popular companies. I think I have about 8 or 9, 10, something like that. But, again, I'm going to mention this now because I don't have it any longer. I had a comic book called Barnyard Comics. I think it was issue 8. Had a giant hippopotamus on the cover. And inside there was a 4-page parody with Adolf Hitler. And the Overstreet didn't mention this. And I think I even wrote to them saying, this has a Hitler parody. But, the price was cheap. I mean, my copy was low, or maybe a good plus or something. But I think in that condition, it was maybe $5 or $6. And I priced it at like $15 or $18, and I did sell it. It took me a couple of years, but, somebody who collects Adolf Hitler, and again, now there's still collectors for that, but are they going to be kids, 30 years from now, even going to care about that stuff? Well, I guess we're going to see. So let me get into the superhero with the companies and stuff, because part 2, I'm going to cover all the genres and things. So again, World War II, a lot of these superhero comic books, were always fighting. Who are they going to fight? You'll either make up your own villains or you fight, what people are seeing. So that's why they were so popular. It's like everybody's anti-Nazi, anti-Japanese. And, they made the Japanese look horrible. There was a lot of racist writings inside these books. Slap a Jap, I think, is one of them I remember. But, there were some that said support the war, and then stuff like they used to have little mini games and stuff. So it was acceptable at the time. Now you probably can never publish something like that without having like an uproar. So I'm going to start with probably the most popular, of course, Marvel. It was Timely Comics, and then became Atlas Comics, and then Marvel Comics. They didn't have too many characters back then. In fact, I only have the big three I'm going to mention, and then I'm going to throw in one that's not really a superhero, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's super popular. But Captain America. Brought him over through the Silver Age with the Avengers, and then took off. He hasn't stopped. So Steve Rogers, Captain America, there's a character that's got longevity. Why? Because he's been around for 80 years. And when you have a character that big, especially with the movies and things, that's where the kids can say, okay, I know this character. He's the same character. So they can go back. And again, Golden Age, sometimes it's really pricey. And you might have to settle for low grade. And you're still spending a couple of $300, $500 for low grade copies of things. But, that character is in your face and probably will be 20, 30 years from now. So Captain America, great investment. And of course, anything here, like I said, you collect what you want. These are all superheroes, so if you like superheroes, you can collect them. But this is going to be more about, I guess, money, because a lot of this stuff isn't cheap right now, unless you can luck out and get a collection inherited or something given to you. Another character, of course, Namor Submariner. It's been around since 80 years now, and still around, still part, came back in the Fantastic Four in the 60s, and then got his own titles and stuff. So Submariner, again, another, I don't remember if he's ever seen the screen, if he's ever hit the movie screen. So if he hasn't, they probably will throw him in eventually. My brain's not working. Anyway, because there were too many Marvel flop movies before Disney took him over. Third character, sort of, but not related, the Human Torch. He was a robot. He's not Johnny Storm. They revived the Human Torch. But sometimes you'll see, and I was going to mention this anyway, but I might as well mention it now. You're going to see some of these titles or characters brought back during modern times. Sometimes in reprints, and sometimes they just bring the characters, like I said, Captain America name or whatever, into the current universe. So, that might help. Sometimes they'll just create a new storyline with these old characters. But, as long as they're in, like I said, a modern time where kids or, young adults are introduced to them, and there is some kind of interest, there's a possibility that the golden age of these characters, the comic appearances and stuff, will hold big value in the future. The one title, which technically I don't think could be categorized as a superhero, then is the Black Knight. He's showing up in a movie. It's not the same character, but there's been a big interest in this original series. I've seen many copies being graded, so possibly some interest. Again, if you like knights and medieval times and stuff, I shouldn't mention genre, but that's like a little niche. That's going to be something that you might want it to get into. It might be too late now. The prices jump through the roof, at least temporarily. Eventually, they might come back down. So that's Marvel Timely Atlas. The big ones. I got to move on to DC National Periodicals. They're the company. They never stopped. Sometimes they changed the characters, but they kept the same names. So, of course, Superman. You had Superman in Action Comics. and then Superman got his own titles. Then it had the spin-offs, which we'll mention in the Silver Age. But there's a lot of characters there. Again, first appearances. So Lex Luthor, first appearance. Lois Lane, first appearance. Covers, the first time they're seen on a cover. These are the bigger issues that are better investments. But again, which characters are popular, whether it's a superhero or a supervillain. Batman, of course, that's another one. I'm not a Golden Age collector. I do have some more. I'm more of the funny animal, maybe, or something. The horror, which I'll get to next part, because I haven't dug them out from behind. There's a lot of mess back there. But Batman, I mentioned I got into Batman thanks to The Killing Joke, and the Golden Age for me was just way too expensive, especially when I'm trying to fill in the rest of the 80s, since I started in 84 and I didn't start collecting Batman until late 80s. So I had to fill in the entire 80s, then the 70s, then the 60s, and maybe some 50s. And what happens is you're collecting so many things, like I mentioned, not only comic books, trading cards, video games, whatever it is. You only have so much money. And I never wanted to drop any kind of money on Batman. So spending $10 to $20 on a Silver Age Batman was fine, but spending $50 to $100 on a Golden Age. At one point when I had my store, I bought 3 Batmans at a garage sale. I paid $9 each. I think it was $40, $47, and $49. But I eventually traded those. I think it was the same day, literally, that I walked into my store with them to some guy for some vintage Star Wars figures on the card, which I, of course, sold. But anyway, Batman. So I might as well. This was the only Golden Age Batman I own. My buddy Ronnie was like, "You got that issue?" I don't think I paid for this. I believe my brother bought a duplicate and gave this to me as a Christmas gift or something. Of course, it's a Christmas cover, but this is one of the popular. It's a beat up copy, maybe a good 2.0, maybe even 1.8. Who knows? I haven't graded it. It is complete, I believe. I don't remember if I even counted pages, but since I didn't buy it, it wasn't as important as if I had. Because you remember I said, make sure your books are complete, and completeness is a big thing with me. But if somebody gives you something, it doesn't matter. If it's incomplete, then you could try to find a complete copy. But you fill it in for now, put in your run. But Batman, of course, he has the most popular villains. Joker, like I mentioned, is huge. And again, any appearances in the book, covers are even better. I'm not even going to mention artists and stuff yet, but certain artists drew characters better. So you have Penguin, you got Catwoman, and so Batman, in your face, been around a long, long time, and I don't think is going away. Most of these characters in the DC universe aren't going away. So Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Flash. Flash was a different character. Green Lantern was a different character. Silver Age Flash technically is where Silver Age starts in 56. I don't know. It's a weird how they do timelines. Gold is supposed to be 50 years old, but now it's 80 something years old. You can't change, I guess, the names of the periods. What do I have here? The Spectre. There's another one of my favorites. I do have, though I said I don't have Golden Age, I do have the DC Archives reprints of the Spectre. I have some of the Batmans. Again, if you can't buy originals, buy the reprints so you can at least read the stories if you can't find them online. Sometimes you have to pay to be part of Marvel or DC and then have access to reading online. Some of the stuff is free. It's public domain. Some you could take the characters and create your own comic books with them, if you can come up with something. So you'll see that. I'll mention it later with the superheroes. Some of the characters came back out after losing their licenses. Justice Society, the Justice Society of America. You've seen that actually in modern times. Yeah, there's actually, I remember it was an 8-issue miniseries, I believe in 1991, somewhere around there. And again, you bring back these Golden Age characters. So you have people like the Sandman. When they came out with Sandman Mystery Theater, they modernized him and Wesley Dodds, and they made it a little darker. How do you capture your audience? You can't have, a lot of times in some of these issues, these comic stories were a little goofy. Again, what's the times? It's like bing, bow, pow, whatever. They used to bang, bash, these, beat up the foes, whether it's Nazis or the villains. And, it was mild compared to what modern people were used to. When the 80s came around, 70s, you started having horror movies, slasher films and things. So the violence became a little more common. So, people were like, oh, it's a little blood. But back then it would have been, oh my God, a little blood. So eventually that's why you got the Comics Code Authority, which we'll talk about later too, in the next part. So you had Sandman, I mentioned him. Starman, they bring back a new Starman. Hourman, which probably most people aren't familiar with. But Hawkman and Hawkgirl, another two. And the one I haven't mentioned, which of course is super popular right now with the new movie, is Wonder Woman. So again, DC, most of those characters are popular now, or even more popular than they were back then. So a DC, to me, is going to hold strength. Moving on to another publisher, Quality. Now, you're going to hear some characters that you're like, hey, they're part of the DC universe or stuff. You're going to see that, I guess, once they went to public domain, other companies acquired them. DC acquired quite a few characters. So Plastic Man, very popular character. DC acquired him and put out, but started with Quality. Doll Man, I think they made a movie because Full Moon Toys, Full Moon Comics put out a Doll Man comic book. Late 80s. I know I have it. But again, Doll Man, Doll Girl, Doll Woman, he always has the alternate. Will Eisner, The Spirit, was seen in newspapers with I think there were like 4 pages or 8 pages total, 4 to 8 pages. They came out every week in the various newspapers throughout the country. So The Spirit, I've seen around, but again, I don't think, not recently, maybe not in the past 20 years. But, when I was growing up, 80s, 90s, I remember The Spirit. I remember reprints coming out and things. There was a character called Kid Eternity, and that might ring a bell if you're familiar with DC Vertigo. And I think it has nothing to do with DC's character. They might have just gotten a name or just used a name. But I actually had one issue of that probably about 15 years ago. I wound up selling that. I don't remember if it was a Kid Eternity issue itself or a different comic book with him in it, but he was definitely part of it. And another popular character, which you've probably seen, I think they keep releasing storylines to this character, is Uncle Sam. And again, the USA, the patriotic, the push for patriotism back then. Uncle Sam was a big character. And then they had I mentioned the mid-70s, the Freedom Fighters. They bring back the characters. DC has them. Okay, so we're going to move on to Fawcett. Fawcett, you're going to, again, here is very popular, Captain Marvel and all his family, Marvel family. Very popular, still sells. Billy Batson, I mean, it's huge. The movie came out. So Captain Marvel's a big one. Let me see if I can read Captain Midnight. Probably not as popular character. And this is where I'm going to start mentioning characters that might not be collectible for the youth today. I doubt if there's any interest whatsoever. And I remember when I had my store, I had a Captain Midnight. I think it was a tumbler. It was like a cup with a lid, if I remember that. I had one of those in my store. I can't read what I wrote here. Oh, Bullet Man, Bullet Girl. When I had my store, I laugh every time I hear Bullet Man. There's this old guy. I call him old because I was 23 when I opened my store. He was probably in his mid to late 50s. He'd come in and ask me. And when I had my stores, again, I didn't bother with Golden Age. That's the one thing that, again, you have so much money, you're trying to carry other stuff. So you had newer stuff. But I had comic books that went back maybe 20, 25 years, 30 years maybe. Some Silver Age, Bronze Age, lots of 80s. But this guy would come in and ask me constantly. Every time he'd come in, I'd see him once every couple of months. Oh, they lived in town, him and his wife. They'd walk up and down the avenue, ask me for Bullet Man. Hey, you got any Bullet Man, Bullet Girl? I'm like, no. And I didn't know who these characters were because this is why I'm bringing up now is I had no clue who these were, and I had no interest who these were. So today's youth, they're not going to know who these characters are, and they probably are not going to have any interest in these characters. So are these going to hold value? The baby boomers are around still. They're buying this stuff, but 20, 30 years from now. So is it feasible to buy something now? Of course. You could buy it while it's hot and maybe only hold it for 5 to 10 years and sell it. Unless these characters are in your face, and I've mentioned this before, if they're in your face, then they have longevity. If they're not in your face, it's people live remembering their youth. Growing up in the 50s or whatever when they were kids. I mean, my parents are in their early 70s now. So my father grew up in the 50s. He was a kid in the 50s. So these might be characters he might have been interested in if he collected comic books. But, now I doubt it. So moving on, Fox Features. And you've probably seen these. I've seen reprints of them. Phantom Lady. Probably one of the most popular of the Fox Features characters. Is she going to be popular now? Again, the youth, I don't know if there's any interest. One character that is, because, of course, DC got him, Blue Beetle. The Blue Beetle started in the Golden Age, and I think they've had a couple of different Blue Beetles over the years. But again, he's part of DC Universe. They come out with, new comics with the Blue Beetle title or Blue Beetle in them. And that might hold some interest for the Golden Age Blue Beetle. What else do I have here? The Flame. It's a character that is more popular for the older generation. Who's the Flame? Again, you're going to have a few. There are always going to be some people interested in this, but when you go percentage-wise, it's not going to be as big. Like Wonder World comics, it's like it's sometimes I come across them and they're usually always brittle. They're splitting. I keep mentioning about condition. Sometimes this stuff is really hard to find in nice condition. And I didn't mention restoration because I covered it last in the intro. But a lot of the Golden Age, you're going to find a lot restored. So some stuff can be removed, like I mentioned. Let the professionals do it. But it might, you'll find spine splits, and it might be feasible to actually get some of this stuff, especially if it's brittle and stuff, conserved. Let it survive, because there may be only 5 to 10 copies of certain of these books in existence. There might be more, because some of this stuff, again, every time you think you're not going to be able to find, oh yeah, there's no more out there and stuff, it shows up in somebody's house. It's in their walls or something. They knock down their walls or renovate, and they find something. I hear it all the time. I see it all the time. Not necessarily comic books, but I think there were the Prohibition. There was some kind of alcohol. I don't know if it was beer or something, but in upstate New York, a person renovated and found unused bottles. Oh, it was whiskey. I think it was whiskey. Anyway, so is this stuff out there? It could be, but if it's not being preserved, bags, boards, mylars and things, and kept well, if they're sitting in walls or something, they're only going to deteriorate even more and not going to be in any good condition. So I didn't mention this, but condition on Golden Age means everything, and that's because of the age. It pretty much has meant everything for 50 years. When Golden Age was 30 years old, it wasn't too bad. 25 years old, it wasn't too bad. There was probably, again, higher grades. But back then, the grades were good, fine, near mint or something. It was like the price guide had like 3 grades, and the prices weren't very much different. Now, grade means everything. Sometimes the highest grade you'll ever see is maybe an 8.0. With your rare, maybe Mile High might be a 9, 9.2, 9.4, but you're not going to have plenty over 8.0. You're lucky sometimes you find them over 6.0 fines. All right, got a little off topic there. Nedor, if I'm pronouncing that right, Nedor, Better Publications, The Black Terror. And I remember, see, this is a character I actually know, not based on the Golden Age, but based on, I think it was Eclipse, if I'm right, or First Comics, one of them. Came out early 90s. I think it was a 3-issue square-bound miniseries on the Black Terror. So, again, is it something that, I believe it was Black Terror. Okay, if my brain's not working, then you can make a comment saying I'm wrong. But if I remember right, there was a Black Terror. So they put out Black Terror, and now you can see it. Ooh, hey, there we go. It's in the youth's hands, so there might be some interest. The Fighting Yank, he's got that I forgot what they're called. The hats from like the Revolutionary War period. Trifold. I don't remember what they're called, but they always wore masks, like a cheesy mask that Robin wears. But he wore a cape too. And again, there's a character not around today. Nobody puts him out. I don't know if I've ever seen a Fighting Yank outside of the Golden Age. Possibly a reprint, but even then, you have to have interest in buying a reprint too. Doc Strange. I mention him just for the fact that he has nothing to do with Doctor Strange from Marvel. But, he that was a character, Doc Strange. So, did Stan Lee come up with him based on that character? Like I said, has nothing to do with it. I think he was just like more of a powerhouse muscle guy. So are these books going to be holding value, going up in value? I'm not too sure about that. I wanted to mention it's MLJ, which is also Archie. Yes, Archie had superheroes, and I'm not talking about Pure Heart the Powerful. Not Archie himself. We're talking about Archie by himself. A different part. So these you probably heard of. They came out. They remade them. I don't know if they're reprints or if they had new stories. I actually have these by Red Circle, which is still Archie, in the early 80s. I think it was 83. And then DC got them with Impact, 91, if I'm right. You got the Black Hood, Firefly, the Shield, and the Web. So those characters pop back up, and again, at least that might have spurned some interest. I guess time will tell, but they're again popular. Shield. Why you have to have a patriotic character? World War II. I'm gonna drink more water. So I got a few more superhero publishers to talk about. I think I'm down to 4. Lev Gleason. You've probably seen his covers. Sometimes his covers were a little gore. I don't think I say gory. I don't know. I think one of them, the kids were riding a steamroller over people or stuff. Daredevil, again, has nothing to do with Matt Murdock, Marvel, but this was the original Daredevil, and the covers were detailed, and I'm going to talk about that too. But the Claw, this a guy I worked with, he loved the Claw, a villain. Silver Streak, you might see. I think it was Silver Streak Comics. I think its first issue has that nice silver metallic ink on it. Before Marvel used to use them as gimmicks in the 80s and 90s, or maybe 90s. There's a character called Crime Buster, which I just happen to have. This isn't my collection, but this is Boy Comics. And if you look at the character, he's got a C on his chest. That's Crime Buster. So here's a Lev Gleason. Again, I don't have much in the way of Golden Age. I just happen to have. I had several issues of Boy Comics. I've sold over over the years, but there was one left. And what else is there? Oh, Iron Jaw. If you remember Iron Jaw character, Atlas came out with them. Atlas Seaboard in the 70s. These people tried to make their own image. This was image before image in the 70s. They had creators come out with their own company. They try to make their own characters or whatever, bring back other characters. And it didn't last long. I think most of the issues were maybe 3 to 5 issues in the title. I have a lot of them. I'll show you that in a future episode when I get to the 70s. I probably have, not the magazines, but I probably have almost all the comic books from Atlas Seaboard. I was searching those for a while, hoping, again, sometimes you speculate. If you can buy stuff cheap enough, maybe somewhere in the future, this will come back. These characters will come back. So Lev Gleason had some cool characters. Again, this is what I wanted to mention. The quality on some of these titles, and I'll mention this with certain artists, cover artists and stuff, the detail, and I'm not talking about just the cover, but the interior. Sometimes I wonder how much time they actually spent drawing these things, because the detail sometimes is so fine. It's like McFarlane drawing all those little spider webs and stuff in Spider-Man, but sometimes you want to collect it just because of the art itself. It's a form of art, and the cover is usually what sells it. I'm a story guy, but if the art is nice enough, you buy it just for the art. You don't even care about the story itself or the characters. Gonna move on to a smaller company called Novelty Press. You'll know Blue Bolt if you're familiar. I've had many. I've probably had like 6 or 7 copies of this. One of the few Golden Age titles that actually had several copies. And if I remember right, I think I traded them all away to a guy who loved the Golden Age, dealer who gave me stuff off my want list, whatever I was collecting. So Blue Bolt, Dick Cole is another character that would have been a little more popular from this company. And maybe if you heard Sergeant Spook, is like a little ghost guy. But other than that, is this going to hold value? Blue Bolts, I can tell you right now, I had them quite a few years, probably at least 10, somewhere between 10 to 15 years. And the price literally never moved in a price guide. So, my copies might have been VG, fine, or something like that. And if it said $8 or $10, and next year it still said $8, $10, the following year still $8, $10. So there you go. Is it going to go up in value? Well, for something like that, that was very flat. And I don't even know if I got that kind of credit towards the trade. I don't remember, but again, are they even getting $8 to $10 in those conditions? Probably not. They did something like that. Could be, it has to be discounted. There's no interest in it. It's got to be discounted. Okay. Holyoke. There's a couple of characters in there. You probably heard of Catman and Kitten. Sort of, popular, probably one of the most popular characters in that, from that publisher. Ragman, the guy dressed up in rags. And again, DC, I don't even know if it's the same character, but DC came out with their own Ragman. If you click on some of these sites, I was looking at one of the sites, and when I clicked Ragman, they showed, all the different issues. And so they showed the Golden Age, they showed the Silver Age, or whatever, Modern Age. I know Bronze Age Ragman had 2-issue series, and then they came out with a miniseries in the 90s or something. I think it was 8 issues or something. But I don't know if Ragman, it's the same character. But again, it's memorable because all he did was dress up in rags. I don't think he had any superpowers. The Hood is not the Black Hood. Is another character that was one of their more popular. I'm going by more popular as in how many appearances they had in their comic books themselves. Captain Arrow, I think there was a Captain Arrow comic. So the Captain Arrow is one of the characters. And here's one that I did want to mention. I left her for last, is Miss Victory. She showed up in... I guess the 80s to 90s. AC Comics used to always put out reprints, but I believe sometimes they put out some, like in FemForce, they put out their own storylines and they use some of these Golden Age characters. So again, can that hold interest? Well, FemForce came out and I think died out by 90s. So is it going to hold value? Your guess is as good as mine. All right, one more I wanted to mention. You probably may never have heard of this company. Most, unless you're into the Golden Age. The reason why I'm mentioning this is Centaur. These books are very, very hard to find in any kind of condition. Meaning like maybe VG or better, 4.0 or better. They're always brittle. They're always splitting. They had characters named Mighty Man. And to me, I looked at, I've seen quite a few Centaur books, and the art is a little cheesy. I mean, it's very plain looking and stuff. But again, are we going to go with rarity versus, popularity? Mighty Man I mentioned, Masked Marvel. What did I write here? Graveston. The other one I noticed because when I've seen these things, Phantom of the Fair, spelled with an F, not a PH. Phantom of the Fair. Just the title, the name of the character himself could generate interest with me because I always love like Phantom the Opera and things. So Centaur, the characters themselves, probably like no interest, but finding them, I mean, they're rare as it is, but then finding them in any types of grade, forget it. So my guess is I probably would push investing with this because of the rarity. Okay, so that's pretty much my superhero thing. And there are tons. I mean, there's hundreds of publishers back then. Everybody and their grandmother, once they saw comic books were popular and sold, I mean, million copies of things. Everybody wanted a piece of it. And they had a lot of stuff. Again, you'll never see, copies of certain things. And like I said, you just go to the census on the grading company and you'll see there's like so many holes and things. And again, is it worth buying? Well, if you find it, I mean, is it worth grading? So, okay, I'm done with superhero. I wanted to move on to one of my favorites. And it's funny because I really don't collect them, but I just love them. The classics, classic comics, Classics Illustrated. I wanted to mention when I had my store, I had a customer named Greg. I'll never forget. Greg's probably not around anymore. He's a heavy drinker. But anyway, hopefully he is. He was a great guy, very friendly guy. And he wanted two things from us. He wanted classic comics, and then he started getting into the ECs, which I'll mention later and different part. But classics, the way he was an artist and maybe struggling artist, I don't know, but he liked to draw. And what he wanted was he wanted a copy of each cover, not necessarily every print, but if you were familiar with classics, started with Gilberton, they were called classic comics. And the way it is, if you look in the price guide or you look online, they were the most popular novels of the time. And, that's probably mostly what the kids were reading in school. And I'll show you some of the things. But, they put them in comic book form because trying to go through some of these novels, and I struggle once in a while. Sometimes like Hunchback of Notre Dame, I can't get past like page 3 or 4. And I started with audiobooks, and even listening to it, I couldn't get past the first like 5 to 10 minutes. I don't know if is something. Usually, your movie or a book, you have something happen that hits you, holds your interest immediately. And if it doesn't, I've tried The Hunchback at least 3 times and it's not working. And it's not Disney. That's the thing, It's like, so classics, they would, put in comic form, the most popular books. And they were so popular that they kept reprinting. And how do you know printings? Because they wouldn't write first print, second print, third print. They created something called the HRN numbers. I don't remember what the H stands for. House, maybe house reorder number. But it's a reorder number. And as the printings changed, they would increase the number on the back. And what that would tell you is what was the current, or probably close to it. It was either like a one number ahead or one number behind. What is the current issue number out of which title was out? So if you had book 40, the first HRN for that should be either 3940, somewhere on there. And then they might have reprinted it by number 4, the 48th title out. They'll put a second print of it. Why? Because it sells out. And, classics are tough because to identify, sometimes they had different printings in counties or I guess not counties, New York. Oh my God, I knew this last night. I was going to say it, like Queens and Brooklyn or whatever, Long Island. They actually printed in early issues. Sometimes they printed them in different. Oh my God, my brain's not working. Anyway, the different parts of the boroughs of New York. So there's actually variations, and again, we'll talk about variations in the future. But classics had tons and tons of variations based on whether or not it came in a box set and there's no cover price. Sometimes they're blank, sometimes they're not there. Sometimes the Canadian has a different price, like it's missing, or then they add it. There was a lot of different telltale signs to find with classics. But eventually the page count, went down. I guess they made the story shorter because some of these novels are really long, and to put them in, even if it's just 16 wraps, you're talking about 64 pages. When you have a novel that's 600-700 pages or something, and you knock it down to 64 pages with pictures, you have to pick the best and things. So I think kids use them as part of their school book reports, sort of cheating. Instead of reading the novel, you read the classics. It was like Cliff Notes before Cliff Notes. But first prints are always sought after. Again, I'm going to show you classics. So like I said, I love classics. If I see them and they're cheap enough, I buy them constantly. But I bought a collection from an estate sale. I think I paid $2 each or something like that. And they were all first print. I mean, every single copy I bought was a first print. Nothing early. I think number 79 was the earliest book I had. But again, they weren't stored properly, so they tan, especially the interior cover. They are, sometimes very tan, and that's not necessarily meaning it's brittle. You got to look at that because I'm going to mention it with Dell and stuff. But tanning occurs sometimes without compromising the paper quality. So if it's not brittle, it is tan, you detract for the grade, but you don't necessarily kill it because, again, it's not falling apart. It's just tan. Most of these books that I have here are probably in the good to VG plus range. Maybe I have a VG fine. But, I just pulled out the Golden Age versions. Again, classics went up to literally the end of the Silver Age. 170 books, something like that. And then they had classic juniors and stuff. But I might not discuss classics in Silver Age at all. So I just wanted to mention here. Again, there are certain titles that only had one printing. Those are probably the better ones. But classics, they've been reprinted many times. Marvel came out with some in the 70s. First Comics came out with them in the 90s. And sometimes they're called Classics Illustrated. They've had different formats. Besides comic books, perfect size, I think I've seen digest size. I think there were comics. But, classics, something that, again, kids might be required to read. So will they hold value? I think they're cool. The reprints, again, you look at Overstreet over a 10-year period, and the reprints, something like Food of the Gods or something. I'm thinking Food of the Gods is a later one. Let me think of something early. Arabian Nights, Three Musketeers. I believe, you have 15 to 20 printings on some of these. Frankenstein. And when they change the cover, that might hold a better value because it's a different artist or different, things. They were always painted, lovely covers. But again, you look at VG, the good VG fine prices, they're stagnant. They stay the same year after year, 10 years, 20 years. There's no change whatsoever. And why? Because some of this stuff is plentiful. They find warehouse, especially in the later printings in the late 60s. So classics, are they going to hold value? I don't know. I think they're cool. Kids do know a lot of the names, maybe, of the stories, the titles and stuff. Like I said, Frankenstein. It depends on the genre. If you like horror, The Time Machine, Christmas Carol, I love that. I don't have an original, but I do have a reprint. I think I have the Marvel one, and I think I have one from First Comics. But I have quite a few classics here. And that's because of this from that estate sale. So, Homer's Odyssey. This is HRN 82, and it's issue 81. So this is the first print. And like I said, sometimes it'd be one issue before, one issue, it'll be on the issue, or it'll be issue after the HRN. But you got to look in the price guide, look online to make sure which version you have. So this is a first print of the Odyssey. Let's see. And you're going to see titles that you might not have ever heard of. I talked to another guy. He says he comes across books all the time when he's grading classics. He goes, I never even heard of this. He's in his early 60s, so he'd have a better chance of knowing it than I do. But here's one, Under Two Flags. Never heard of it. He usually says by Ouida. Ouida. No idea. But again, it's number 86, HRN 87, first print. The Green Mansions by W.H. Hudson. And again, look at the painted covers. It's like really, really detailed, really nice. This is number 90, but it's HRN 89. So this one's before. Again, this is from 1951. And my tanning is more of a brittle thing. I have chips on it. You probably heard of this one. Longfellow's Miles Standish. if you're familiar. Again, first print. It's number 92, HRN 92. Pudd'n'Head Wilson, which it's funny because I actually remember this. That guy Greg, I think he bought one of these from me because I remember him mentioning the title sticks in my head. Here's another one I never heard of, even though it's Robert Louis Stevenson. It's called David Balfour, famous for his pirates and stuff. It's exactly what this looks like, but I never read this, never had any interest. It's number 94, HRN 94. Here's one you'll definitely remember, and you always heard of, William Tell. What does William Tell? He has to shoot the apple off his son's head, and that's referred to constantly, around. Okay, what else do I have here? Here's another one I never heard of. It's issue 102, called The White Company, and it's HRN 101. So this one comes before 1952. Never heard of it. It's by Frank Buck, called Bring 'Em Back Alive. Looks like somebody's in the jungle. Some of these titles, if they're the only ones, they might be rare enough to somebody invest in. Buffalo Bill, famous Western guy, well known. So Buffalo Bill, definitely one. Something I've never heard of. It's called King of the Khyber Rifles. No idea. Never read it. I never even read this. A lot of times I don't want to touch, especially if they're brittle. I don't want to be playing around with the comic book, because then it starts falling apart, pieces come off. But it's number 107, HRN 108. Pitcairn's Island. I've never read it. Never read the novels or anything. So another one. The 45 Guardsmen. I'm just going through because I grabbed a stack of the ones I know are Golden Age. This is 1953. We call this a 3-0. Number 113, HRN's 114. How I Found Livingstone. I never read it. I never heard of it. So a lot of these you probably wouldn't know. More of the Silver Age ones, I think, are some of the more popular ones. But I mentioned it: Three Musketeers, Arabian Nights, The Frankenstein, Christmas Carol, Food of the Gods, First Men on the Moon. H.G. Wells is a popular one. Here's The Hurricane. Never read it. This is 1954, and I actually stopped. This is number 120. I stopped pulling books past this because I actually have quite a few after this that cover Silver Age. The Mutineers. Again, if you're like into pirates and stuff, it'd be cool. But again, notice the painted cover. I mean, they're like phenomenal. And this is why that guy wanted it. And the last one I have here, Fang and Claw. It's number 123, HRN 124, first print. And, it's got chips and dust shadows. I might have undergraded them because, that's one of the things. I don't like shadows. I don't like the dust shadows. So that's classics. Are they going to hold value? First prints, yes. Single printings, yes. Popular titles, yes. But if nobody cares about the title, it doesn't hold interest. The later printings, when there's like 14 prints, who's going to care about printing number 11? And I believe some of this stuff is still being found in warehouse stocks. Maybe certain prints or whatever. You find Twin Circle is like the later Silver Age. I remember, I think it was The Wizard of Oz. I've seen quite a few copies of that. Again, it's popular. That's one of the juniors, the kids. My wife was collecting some of these. She was keeping some of the juniors, Cinderella, or I can't even think of the other ones. I think Snow White had one. So, the fairy tales, the ones that kids know, those will probably hold more value than some of these unknown books that, if it's not required reading, there's so much out there. You think about it. This is like 80s, 70s, something years old, 60 something years old. There's so much has been published since then that unless it's a classic through time, it's not going to be required reading for school because there's so much from modern times, from the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, again, there's only so much you can have your students do or learn about. And it's sad because, some of this stuff could have been interesting if, you're exposed to it. But anyway, I'm going to end part 1 here, and I'll do part 2. I'm going to continue with different genre. I might pull out specific companies, but I think I'm going to gear towards more of the genre and give my opinion on whether or not it's going to hold any value, because there's some things you got to weigh versus rarity. Like I said, there's no copies graded of certain titles or certain issues versus interest, and we'll get to that next part. So I'll see you next time.